In a world of magic and diverse races, Rondel is the main city of this vast kingdom. After the age of myths and swords, Rondel entered the age of magic, where magic was as developed as any other magical city. However, the political structure still followed a feudal model, with kings and queens. Even so, the current age of magic is called the Golden Age of Rondel. On the 29th of December, 1999, in the century of magic, the world turned upside down with the arrival of the will of an archmage. He claimed to have left power, knowledge, and riches hidden somewhere in the world. Those who wished could search for this treasure. The wizard was a pioneer who led Rondel into the golden age of this magical century, as well as being the archduke of the Bring-Up Empire. He was a ninth circle wizard named Manuel Lucas, but the bright light he left behind went out as quickly as it illuminated. Lucas said anyone could possess the destiny he left behind. After that, most people in the world wanted to meet this destiny, and countless rumors began to circulate. The first rumor said that Lucas's dungeon was in the land of dragons. Another claimed that their assets and knowledge were divided among the allied nations, where they said that their air fortress was located above the sea, in the center of the world. Regardless of everything, everyone was determined to find Manuel Lucas's fate. However, rumors are things that pass from mouth to mouth, and no one has ever found a clue. So, 20 years have passed, and now we see a boy looking at a system screen. He is sweating after all. He received the fate of Manuel Lucas. Smiling, happy to have achieved this destiny, he begins his journey. In 2007, at Castle Lorraine, the butler asks the castle boy if he is going to study. The boy agrees and says he will return his books. The old man replies that if he had been asked, he would have done it himself. Politely, the boy says it wasn't necessary. The maids realize that Earl Lawrence's second son is a really good boy. This is our protagonist, and he is reincarnated. Nothing special happened in the last days of his ancient life. He died in a truck accident while serving in the army. But when he opened his eyes, he woke up in the body of this boy named Adrian Lawrence. Now he began to live as the son of a family of viscounts who own an estate. At first, everything was confusing, but now he can use his past experiences as a great advantage in this life. Passionate about his studies, a man praises the protagonist, making the father proud of his son's talent. Our hero does everything to please his father, but it seems that some people are irritated by this. For him, something is disappointing. Rondel is more advanced than Earth, and this has made it very difficult for him to learn. Still, he can only keep striving to increase his value, and therefore must keep acting like a genius. But something unexpected happened. This life is not easy to face with just effort. When our protagonist was 7 years old, he was poisoned. Luckily, he survived. Adrian knew who the culprit was. A woman came to his side, scaring the boy with her furious, murderous aura. She was the official wife of our protagonist's father, named Anna Warren, and she was the one who tried to assassinate him. For her, the boy, being of humble origins, did not deserve his father's attention. This infuriated our hero, who thought the political system was very backward. He wondered why his father didn't scold her, and imagined that perhaps he was pretending not to know, even though he did know. So the boy decided to stop acting like a genius. A few years later, on May 1st, 2019, our 20-year-old protagonist is now in an ordinary convenience store. The employee asks if he is a celebrity, but the attendant tells him to keep quiet, explaining that he is a nobleman from that area. The clerk comments that he doesn't seem to dress like a nobleman. Our protagonist calls the attendant and says he didn't find any Chronicle Points cards. She responds that they are available at the register and asks how many he wants. Gently, he says he wants them all. They both thank you for your purchases. As the hero leaves the store, the employee is reprimanded by the clerk for not knowing how to treat a nobleman. She admits she was scared when he walked into the store in person for the first time. The newbie asks if he usually goes there, and the attendant confirms, adding that he is a big fan of games. According to her, he spent 5 million on game cards, the equivalent of 5 million Korean won. Magard calls our protagonist, saying that young Master Cedric is visiting his residence, which angers Adrian. The protagonist's beautiful mother calls him. He asks about his brother, while his mother is worried. Cedric, the protagonist's brother, yells at him for not using a vehicle on the property, which angers the protagonist and scares his mother. He complains that the protagonist doesn't think about his family's reputation, and Adrian thinks he wouldn't even be able to take care of himself if he weren't a noble. Our protagonist doesn't want to prolong the fight, and so says he was reckless, stating that he will pay more attention next time, calming the black-haired man down a little. He laughs and says he doesn't need to be proud, since he's half-breed, but our hero asks what brings him there. His foolish brother says that their father plans to force him to take over a family business, the Far's Distribution Company, and laughs, as if the boy should already know this. Adrian understands well. Noble families, like the Laurens, are true conglomerates, each controlling several lucrative businesses. Far's, for example, is an arm of the family fortune involved in mining. Adrian always thought his father was greedy and incompetent, refuses to get involved in the issue. Cedric smiles, expecting this reaction, and Adrian asks him to leave, stating that he has already spent enough on his fun. The brother laughs loudly as he walks walks past him with a menacing look, saying that he should just keep it that way. The mother is worried, but Adrian smiles. He knows exactly what he's doing and tells his mother not to get involved. Our protagonist simply wants to play and not be disturbed unless it's urgent. After the poisoning that almost killed him, Adrian abandoned his genius image and isolated himself. Imagine that your father was never interested in a concubine's son. He became indifferent. For 10 years, he let his presence be erased while he suffered insults. After graduating, he left the castle with his mother. They say it's a side effect of the poison. Now, it is seen as a parasite. Adrian realizes that all the servants are under the official wife's influence, so he can't even open his mouth. Adrian is silent for a moment as he arrives in his room. He sees his virtual glasses and slowly walks to the table. He takes them and puts them on, smiling when he thinks that everyone says he moves away from reality to live in games. He knows this isn't true. The system informs him that he has completed the first phase of the Destiny quest and is starting to create his character based on his real-life body. If someone wants to monitor you, they must also do so in the virtual world. Chronicle online game skills are reflected in reality. 10 years ago, Adrian was studying and researching Manhwa Lucas when he discovered something fascinating. The Lucas family crest had the word "Y." This impressed the boy, who concluded that the wizard could also be like him, from Earth. After so long, Adrian found Lucas's destiny. Hoppa had his hands on this game's fate. He took a direct blow to the arm while facing a goblin who threw the blade that injured him. It says the pain is real. With fate in hand, the real suffering began. He wonders if he could fight without fear. Lucas's destiny was hidden in the least expected place, online, in a virtual world. Even in a virtual world based on reality, it is still a game, and therefore he should not feel pain because it is filtered. However, he feels pain in real life. After synchronizing the game with real life, the boy can feel the circulation of mana in his chest. A magic circle is created in your real life. Adrian states that this is the true value of destiny, while feeling his virtual body. The system warns you not to leave the game. Now, with the magic circle created, he wonders if he will be able to learn any combat techniques from the books around him. When touching one of them, a system window appears, asking if he would like to absorb the contents of the books. Impressed, he observes the functionality with admiration, as if it were a gift from the gods. However, he soon feels nausea and an intense pain in his head. Despite the throbbing pain, he thinks that learning skills and spells just by touching books is an advantageous power. He then takes the last book, which is about hiding the magic circle. The system asks him if he wants to acquire this skill, and he agrees, considering it extremely valuable. Intense pain invades his mind, but he smiles, falling to the ground, thinking that he never had much hope in destiny. Lying on the floor, he can barely move, just wanting to live in peace with his mother. Promise you will do everything you can to achieve this. The next day, in the mansion's training hall, a night guard named Vice praises his stamina. The young man replies that it's nothing, while the blonde hands him a handkerchief, surprised to learn that he wants to train in fencing. The white-haired boy comments that his body feels heavier lately and believes that training in real life will help him in the game. Within the game, he realizes the limit of his low resistance, as his character is synchronized with real life. Thinking that he can feel his mana circle and that his stamina is gradually improving, he concludes that the game's attributes also affect his real life. Grateful for being able to hide his mana circle with the skill acquired in Lucas's tower, he tries to hide his happiness when questioned by Vice. He thinks he got a good item in the game. The people around criticize them, calling the protagonist an addict and a freak, which angers Vice. However, the protagonist asks him not to worry, as he prefers to avoid the pathetic looks of Anna and her half-brother, and believes that being ignored is better. Back in the game, he confirms that the attributes are reflected in real life and decides that he needs to earn money and more skills. Spend your in-game money on purchasing items such as fee boosts and blessings. He regrets not using the money sooner, but he could only access the store from level 10. The main event of the day is the invocation of a support. Thinking that, with his low resistance, it would be better to have support, he decides to form a team so as not to waste money. Hopefully, he makes 10 summons, but only gets low-level supports. Disappointed, he thinks that it is difficult to get anything good in these gacha games and has already spent more than 30 million without success. However, something surprises him. Arcia, the Celestial Steel. Impressed, he thinks she must be a unique and yet undiscovered character. At level 250, she is one of the best in her class. You feel lucky to have good support and decide to register. The system informs him that he will not be able to make changes to the support and asks if he is sure. Confused, he questions the impossibility of freely replacing the support, but the system explains that it is an exception. He believes that this is a limitation imposed by the system itself, but that Arcia will be the best support for a wizard like him. Confidently confirm the registration. The system starts the process, and the effect is different. Arcia is summoned, appearing in front of him as a beautiful girl in armor. Although she seems like an emotionless automaton, he thinks it doesn't matter and calls on her to level up. Arcia blocks any attacks with his huge shield, while he casts spells like magic missiles. Impressed by her attributes, he realizes that he reached level 20 with ease thanks to the help of his tank. He concludes that it will be difficult to practice magic in real life. The system alerts him to shut down and rest, as he has already been playing for 15 hours. Then he logs out and sits down, exhausted. While stretching, thinking about taking a nap, Adrian decides to go to the training room, but suddenly realizes that there is someone in the room with him. Scared, thinking that Arcia is out of the game, he comes across the girl from the game now in his room. He asks who she is, and Arcia responds that she is her master's support. Our protagonist retorts, saying that's not what he asked, holding her chin. He claims he wants to know how she got out of the game. Arcia understands that his curiosity is about how his presence is being maintained in reality. Adrian agrees, thinking that she seems to know the difference between reality and the game. Arcia explains that she is a homunculus android created by Manuel Lucas, based on Arcia's characteristics from Celestial Steel. Adrian asks if she is like a legacy of Wizard Lucas, and the girl confirms, embarrassed. Our protagonist thinks he chose the most versatile support and asks if her stats are the same as in the game. She confirms that she will recover her restricted attributes as the protagonist's level increases, but that at the moment, she has strength comparable to that of a Grand Master. This information scares Adrian, as he knows that a Grand Master has the level of an 8th Circle Wizard, being one of the most powerful on the continent. He reflects on how Manuel Lucas managed to create something so monstrous, but concludes that it is good to have a companion who only obeys his orders. The problem was hiding it. Arcia asked where she was before, and Adrian replied that it was in a magical warehouse, but to get back, she would have to walk. He asked her to try to hide her mana. Arcia managed it, and Adrian thought that now she wouldn't be discovered by the knights. Reluctantly, he admitted he had no choice. He commented that his reputation was already one of the worst in the mansion, with rumors circulating that he had brought a woman to the place. Everyone believed that he was the most shameless person in the world. However, the protagonist's mother was super happy, asking when he was going to get married. Adrian remembered this scene as the system alerted him that he had reached level 30. When looking at the system, he thought that this way, no one would suspect Arcia. Adrian asked Arcia what happened to her body in the real world while she was in the game. She explained that she was going into sleep mode, but would continue to monitor her master. The protagonist asked if she would notify him if something happened, and she confirmed. The two were looking into a black mist when an orc warrior named C appeared before them. It was the second stage of Destiny's mission. Calling Adrian a human, the orc explained that it would be special to kill him. A system notification informed him that Adrian would not be able to use items in this mission. Confident, Adrian called for Arcia, who understood the order. The orc charged forward screaming as Arcia prepared to block the blow with her shield. The shield remained intact, knocking the monster back with the force of its own attack. Startled, the orc saw a light when Adrian charged a spell to launch directly at the monster. He fired a magic missile at his eye, dealing critical damage. He thought his magic missiles were stronger because of his body and equipment. He was distracted, and a blow came directly from his left, but Arcia blocked it with her shield. Adrian breathed a sigh of relief, thinking this was crazy. He looked at the monster, realizing that the critical hit had affected him well, but commented that the orc was strangely strong. He thought that without Arcia, he would have died in just one hit. Then, he used a digging spell, creating a hole in the ground and throwing the orc off balance. With the monster down, Adrian didn't let fear stop him and ordered Arcia to stop him from getting up while he attacked. The orc gradually lost HP. After some time, he stood up with only 50 HP left. Adrian admitted that he was very persistent, deeply angering the orc, who charged forward angrily. Adrian charged one last spell and fired a magic missile that defeated the monster. The system reported that he completed the second stage of the Destiny quest and unlocked the third floor in Manuel Lucas's magic tower. In Viscount Lawrence's office at night, the protagonist's father looked thoughtful looking out the window. A woman asked what he was thinking. Rare Lawrence, Adrian's father, stared at the woman as she approached, questioning why he was alone at night and if his thoughts were connected to his son's actions. The old man called her Anna, his first wife, and showed a letter. Anna read the document about a possible call to war, becoming scared. She asked if he planned to send Cedric to war, but the man remained silent, smiling. Anna suggested they send Adrian instead. The old man asked if, even after isolating him, she still wanted this, to be useful to her. The woman said that it was the protagonist's choice, and that he has only been taking advantage of the rights of the nobility. Rafford said she was wrong about him, and she asked what he meant by that. The blonde-haired man remained silent and said that her son will inherit the territory and that he will not cause any problems for her or his stepfather. She just needs to follow his decisions. This left Anna silent, but with a face of anger and hatred. He said that he will send Adrian to war, and that when he returns he will no longer be a member of the family, hoping that he and his mother will not be in danger in the future. He stated that this would be enough for her, asking her to stop worrying and let Adrian be free. During the night, he praised the protagonist's physical strength, which has improved a lot in recent days. Our protagonist thought he only became strong because he reached level 30 in the game and completed the second stage of the Destiny quest. He gained a lot of money, his second mana circle as a reward, as well as obtaining his subspace, which was like an inventory in real life. He thought that, with his effort, he could be a wizard with the physical abilities of a knight and become someone even more incredible than Archmage Lucas. He said he needed to stop to rest until someone called him, saying he was summoned to the castle. A few days later, our hero arrived at Castle Lawrence. The protagonist was wondering why he was called, but his brother started shouting, asking why he would represent the family on the battlefield. The old man explained that Cedric was the family heir and could not go to the battlefield. The protagonist's mother asked if Adrian wasn't as important as Cedric. Ray said there was a difference in value between him and the family heir. The protagonist felt a rising wave of irritation as he listened to his father's words. Still, he tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe it wasn't so bad. After all, he knew he was just a replacement, someone no one would mess with. But as soon as he returned, he could free himself from Anna's surveillance. With an air of confidence, he declared that he would participate in the war on behalf of the Lauren family. The old man thanked the protagonist, which only increased Cedric's fury. He accepted his father's decision, asking him not to tarnish the family name. The boy considered him ungrateful and immature. The protagonist said he would do his best, but his father called him for a private conversation. They walked alone, and Adrian imagined it was something very private. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked. The father replied that he would relocate him and his mother to the King's Lands as a reward for him going in Cedric's place. Adrian thought that Anna had allowed this, even though she hated him so much, and decided not to trust his father completely. He said he would think about it. The father understood his distrust, and the protagonist stated that he only needed to return from the battle alive to decide. Rayford then remembered something and handed something to Adrian. He asked what it was, and his father explained that they were protective artifacts that would be extremely valuable in war. Adrian thanked him, while his father asked him to be conscious to survive. The boy looked back, realizing that his stepmother and brother were watching, radiating anger and hatred. He knew it was obvious that the two would be watching. His father reassured him, telling him not to worry about his mother. Adrian thought his father had let him down several times, but now that he was surrounded by enemies, he could only trust him. With a confident tone, he stated that he would go to war, surprising the patriarch by declaring that he would trust him. Sometime later, the father felt something, a sudden and intense pain in his head. Using a ring that had the ability to reduce pain, he managed to get up with difficulty, thinking that Adrian was just pretending after the poison incident. Elsewhere, Adrian's mother was crying as he tried to calm her down. She was afraid that something might happen to him after the battle. Adrian tried to reassure her, saying that it would be good to have more crimes in their names. His mother was confused, but he explained that Arcia was guarding the door, making sure no one heard them. Adrian said that he wouldn't get hurt like before and that everything would be over soon, asking her to wait a little longer. 2 days later, an employee was confused to see Adrian, asking who the girl was. "Her name is Arcia," replied the protagonist. The employee commented that he heard about the relationship between the two and seemed worried. "Think of her as my secretary," he said, thinking Arcia was his greatest defense. "I can't leave her behind, but I need to improve my survival tactics." Spending 200 million on the game, he completed the 3rd level of luck and was about to enter the 4th level. The 3rd level rewards cost 100 billion each, and Adrian even got healing potions and some elixirs, thinking that these rewards in his inventory were perfect for the current situation. The boy said he would rest, and if anything happened, he should send a message. This left others confused. "I'm going to play a little," he declared. "Is there a problem?" A red head in the background said the rumors were true. Adrian thought he was a vanguard, a special force equipped with special equipment and the most important soldiers to assess a nation's military strength. Dalton said that he would be seen as an incompetent commander if he were to play, and his bad reputation would only get worse with the girl in the game teasing him. Suddenly, he was interrupted in a threatening manner. "Watch your words," someone said, leaving Dalton shaking in fear. "Sorry about my subordinate," said the deputy leader of the Knights, understanding that Adrian just wanted to kill time during the trip. Billum didn't care about Dalton's opinion, and Adrian was sure he didn't like him either. "Don't worry about it," he said, trying to lighten the heavy mood. Then, he sent a message as soon as he arrived at the game. A potion called Salamander Tears was thrown towards a caterpillar, causing an explosion that defeated it. Adrian thought 3,000 damage was very acceptable. Soon, the system reported that he had reached level 80. Ariel took him to her secret room. Finally, Adrian had reached the 4th level of the mission. The demon called them prey, and he knew it needed to end quickly. The protagonist thought about his enemy. According to him, licks were difficult to kill, but this one specifically seemed slow. The Lich cast a cursed stone spell at Arcia and then used an ice spear spell toward Adrian. Adrian is taken by surprise when the monster attacks earlier than expected. Arcia can't help him, so he can only dodge. He ends up being hit in the shoulder, screaming in pain while the Lich laughs, saying he can hear the protagonist's bones and flesh being crushed on the ground. He trembles, unable to think straight due to the pain, while that annoying laugh echoes in his mind. Adrian recognizes that laugh as if he's heard it before. He sees his brother in that Lich, which makes him even angrier. Laughing, the Lich raises his wand and orders Adrian to stay on the ground, launching a fireball towards him. Adrian dodges, moving forward with his support, trying to confuse the skeleton. In a stroke of dexterity, he uses a healing spell right in front of the Lich, who screams in agony. He tells Arcia not to give the Lich room to cast another spell, and she confirms. It is then that Adrian is reminded of the best way to face a Lich, adorning his equipment with a sacred attribute. The Lich screams as Adrian and Arcia beat him with the holy element, whimpering. He asks how he can do physical damage with his wand, then casts a wall of fire spell and brags about keeping his distance like a demon. Adrian crosses the flames in front of the Lich. The Lich curses him for crossing the wall of fire, but in hatred, our hero hits the skull and tells that Cedric-like monster to die. Then, the system informs him that he has completed the 4th lucky phase. In pain, Adrian places his hand on his chest as Arcia runs towards him. He feels like the adrenaline has run out, and now the pain of the fight hits him with full force. Arcia takes a potion from Adrian's inventory and carefully gives it to him. He is impressed that she can access his inventory and realizes that she really is special. He thanks her, saying he is much better. The 5th floor of the tower is unlocked, and the system teleports them both there. Adrian runs towards the trunk, excited. He opens the chest, eager to learn about the 500 billion reward, but notices something else inside the chest. He receives a pair of round glasses and says it's impossible for them to be just normal glasses. Then he asks for a detailed description and sees that they are his glasses with observation, clairvoyance, and night vision, as well as several other vision abilities. Impressed that someone as suspicious as him would receive such a useful item. The system then creates your 4th circle. They arrive at the camp. People are impressed that the 2nd son of the Lawrence family was chosen to come. The elders talk about waiting for Cedric, while saying that Adrian became an idiot after ingesting poison. Adrian smiles, saying he's the boy who took the poison, and they both say amicably that he doesn't look like an idiot. The two are counts in his head and assistants to this headquarters. The white-haired boy says it's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Evans notes that Adrian's troops are made up of 5 vanguards and 50 knights. Adrian confirms, but the Viscount emphasizes that this war is not just for knights, but also for vanguards. Adrian thinks they treat the armed elite like objects. Vanguards can only be controlled by 7th circumference mages, and unfortunately, he agrees with him. Adrian remembers that the vanguard was created by Lucas, and the Viscount explains that Adrian's army was organized as the 2nd Independent Brigade. Adrian agrees, and then explains to his group that the army was organized as the 2nd Independent Brigade. The boy says to continue, and keeps in his mind a wish that Count Otis is someone good. After a week, Adrian is in the game thinking that Commander Otis is the best kind of superior for him. Count Otis is traveling back and forth with the transports until the war breaks out. Adrian thinks he can play with this all day, but suddenly Arcia calls him saying that someone entered the room, leaving him with a look of hatred and anger. He closes the game and sees Arcia holding someone. Dalton asks how the woman has so much strength. Adrian takes his glasses, asking why he came there. Observing Dalton's status, he realizes that he is excited. He asks for an explanation for Dalton being there, and Dalton says he is worried about his health. Just as he was about to blame her, the boy kicks the man in the shin. He doubles over in pain, and Adrian says he should have sent a message. Arcia always protects him. Adrian says he entered the brigade commander's office without permission and asks if he wanted to kill him. The man screams in anger and fear, saying he is a vanguard. Then he gets another kick from the boy, who says he needs convincing. He then asks Arcia what happened, and she responds that Dalton tried to separate her from him. Dalton is embarrassed as Adrian asks if he tried to take her somewhere else, and she confirms. Dalton shouts angrily at the protagonist, accusing him of trying to frame him. He yells at the protagonist to trust his vanguard instead of a crazy girl like that girl. The protagonist notices 3 more soldiers heading towards the sea. Arcia, with a firm expression, hands Adrian a knife, who reacts harshly, saying that this is insubordination and that he deserves punishment. Adrian holds the knife firmly, pointing it at Dalton's abdomen and demanding he step forward to receive his punishment. The soldiers and Dalton mock the protagonist's face, who decides that now is not the time to calm down. He needs to show his true colors and challenges Dalton to leave somewhere else. Suddenly, someone shouts that the commander is calling Deputy Leader Billum, leaving him confused. Bill explains that the brigade commander has given an execution order to Dalton and that they need to go immediately. Bill thinks this is an unacceptable unexpected turn of events. When they arrive at the scene, Bill holds a knife that was thrown towards him, noticing the little blood on its blade. The protagonist grumbles that he should have arrived faster and almost killed Dalton. Bill, coldly and indifferently, stares at Dalton on the floor, groaning in pain. The protagonist, with a mocking tone, says that knights shouldn't harass women, leaving the old man completely tense, shouting and asking what happened. William bows, apologizing and taking responsibility. He orders Dalton to be disarmed and arrested. The other three will also be taken to prison for insubordination and complicity. Adrian, not hiding his contempt, comments that he is not there to take care of children and pats Bill on the shoulder, saying that this is not a county thing. Then he walks away into the next room, muttering that the place reeks of blood. Dalton realizes that he has finally shown his true face and gives a light, satisfied smile, thinking that something interesting has appeared there. Back in the game, Arcia and Adrian are arguing fiercely. Arcia blocks an enemy attack while the protagonist attacks with magic. He realizes that the opponent is trying to exploit his weaknesses. Your enemy is a fallen knight named Zen, and to complete level 5 of the random encounter, the protagonist needs to kill him. Zen prepares an attack with a purple aura on his sword, roaring that the protagonist must die. Adrian dodges with agility, leaving Zen astonished. Suddenly, something flies towards you. Arcia lands a blow to Zen's face. The protagonist prepares to cast a spell when the old man laughs, finally understanding that he is just a stepping stone for the protagonist. It notifies the system that the mission has been completed and the 6th floor of the tower has been unlocked. The protagonist receives 2 trillion loot, which makes him ecstatic, but he is surprised to see another notification and various equipment from Istro. He knows he will only be able to use the cape and the scepter, while the rest will be for Arcia. First of all, he stops when Arcia informs him about an intruder. "Sorry for barging in," the butler says nervously. The protagonist asks what happened, and the butler explains that he felt a powerful aura. The boy reassures him, saying that he was just checking out some artifacts and that there is no need to worry. Asking permission, the butler says goodbye and leaves the room. The protagonist takes the sword out of the inventory and confirms that this is a weapon worthy of an elite vanguard. In addition to possessing enough power to equal a normal person to a vanguard for 15 seconds, Adrian thinks that the weapons used by the vanguards amplify aura, as it is difficult to store aura, and wonders what the ability of mage equipment would be, being surprised to discover that both items have the ability to store aura. He understands why everyone wants Lucas's destiny. Elsewhere, it's been 2 weeks since he was named commander. The protagonist says he doesn't need an escort, and everyone agrees. Adrian notes that everyone would give their lives for the country, but they are still just sitting around waiting. Adrian realizes that after the DOL incident, everyone has avoided and respected him, but the most peculiar person is Bill, who looks at him with disconcerting friendliness. The boy thinks this is good, because now he can play in peace. However, looking at Arcia, he notices something strange. He is confused when he sees her status as happy, and thinks that the girl is like a dog that gets excited when going for a walk. Even though she is a homunculus, he still has a hard time believing that she can actually have emotions. With the sparkle in his eyes, he thinks this place is really interesting. Taking another look at her, he notices that she is extremely happy, which makes him laugh, leaving Arcia completely confused. Later, he suggests they go out more often, and Arcia agrees. A soldier arrives in front of him, visibly uncomfortable, and asks what the problem is. The blonde approaches, blushing, and asks if they can go out for a drink sometime. The protagonist notes his status as embarrassed and uncomfortable, understanding the situation. When you see the boys laughing in the background, he asks if the boys behind him sent him to do this. The boy shakes his head in denial, and the protagonist feels like he must have a reason, but he's just not interested. He turns his back and starts to walk away. However, he stops halfway and decides to ask the soldier why he chose to become a knight. The soldier fumbles, apologizing and assuring him that it won't happen again. Our protagonist watches him in silence, surprised to realize that he is the first person, besides the homunculus, to possess more than 2 high talents. He has skill as both a mage and a warrior, so why is he the target of ridicule from the other knights? The protagonist finally decides that it is not his problem and says goodbye, turning to move on. He mutters to himself that perhaps it would have been better if he had been born as a mage instead of a soldier, which surprises the boy. Adrian berates the other soldiers as he leaves, thinking it's a waste. The boy, fearing to get involved and avoid problems, reflects that Lopez is unique. Even without physical combat power, he would do well if he combined his magic with Vur equipment. The chances are good, according to the protagonist. It would be wonderful to have him under your command. However, the problem would be convincing Count Otis to hand him over, and he thinks a bribe would be a good option. Having made up his mind, he realizes that both of them will have a busy time. The boy passes through the camp corridor, remembering Adrian's words earlier, reflecting that he is different from the other nobles. When he arrives at Commander Otis's room, he introduces himself to enter. In his mind, he imagines that Adrian is different from what the rumors say, and that's a little scary. He then enters the commander's room. The commander greets him, welcoming him in a friendly manner, but Lopes seems perplexed to see him there. He asks why he he was called, and the chubby man introduces Adrian as the representative of the Lawrence family. From now on, Mr. Lawrence will be Mr. Lopes. The blonde boy is confused. In the protagonist's past life, China lost to Korea in the World Cup. A citizen asked how they didn't find 11 good players among a billion Chinese, and the answer is because Messi and the Chinese Cristiano Ronaldo are somewhere tending plants on a farm. Adrian, with this in mind, realizes that potential doesn't matter if it isn't properly explored. He is surprised to notice that in this place, there are so many people following the wrong path. There is a third-class knight, Alan Lopes, a merchant, Barbara Urson, a worker, Emmanuel, a soldier capable of playing an instrument, Eric Jones, a boy who tried to sell drink to the soldiers, Nicholas Brown, and a maid named Linda Noah. The protagonist thinks each of them is amazing, but they never got the chance to shine. The girl calls the protagonist, asking why she is there since her mage test was negative. Adrian responds that the test was wrong, and she is embarrassed, understanding. And our hero thinks that the payment of $500,000 was worth every penny. The boy knows that none of them know the real reason they are there. The tall man orders no one to question and tells them to believe in the protagonist. Our boy thinks this guy has a great talent for aura. Adrian knows he would die of hunger and exhaustion, but putting that aside, he has confidence in the protagonist. Then the boy tells them to change their clothes, stating that they don't need to worry because they are 100 kilometers from the front line, and therefore they can choose any clothes from that noble area. He smiles, thinking that everyone is embarrassed that they have never set foot in such a place. One of the men says he has already chosen. Our protagonist comments that he looks good and thinks that the boy has a high talent in politics. He tells others that price doesn't matter and that they should choose the best for themselves. Talent doesn't matter at all if you don't train it. They will train outside the base and be educated to fit into the environment. All the boys are impressed when they see their new homes. Our protagonist confirms that this is the house where they will spend most of their time. The boy has already prepared the employees, so they should focus on their studies, in addition to making this month's payment to them of $20 million. And he says not to forget the contract. The boys stand at attention and say they will do their best. Our protagonist says their pay will only increase if they prove their worth, but that won't happen overnight. Finally, he looks at the blonde and smiles, asking her not to disappoint him. Everyone affirms and agrees. Our protagonist likes their spirit, and his schedule is to study and train for 16 hours every day. There are all the best talents our hero has encountered. In the future, they will be the elite he chose. This is an investment that promises a bright future, a goal that our protagonist seeks with fervor. As he walks through the city's busy streets, his mind buzzes with thoughts about the inevitable confrontation with his brother and perhaps his stepmother. He also needs to protect his mother, but his daydreams are interrupted by a presence that follows him closely. Before the shadow gets any closer, Arcia acts with lethal precision. She grabs her pursuer by the neck and throws him against the wall. "Good morning," says the protagonist with a sharp smile while looking at the man. In recent days, the hero has not had a moment of peace, his constant concern being the safety of his allies. Hidden in the shadows, spies emerge daily, and he deduces that Cedric is only sending two to take turns. With a knife in his hand, our protagonist looks at the man, who trembles with fear. "Save your words," he orders, as the cold gleam of the blade reflects in his eyes. Arcia effortlessly throws the spy to the ground, and Adrian adds with an acid tone, "Stupidity is indeed a dangerous defect. How do you value your life?" asks the protagonist, his voice as sharp as a blade. The man feels the pressure of an overwhelming aura as he realizes that Arcia is an aura expert. Desperate, he tries to deny any knowledge, but our protagonist already knows everything. He mentions the portal and the agent's involvement with frightening precision, leaving the spy even more terrified. "You work for Cedric, don't you? I bet he has no idea what's going to happen," teases Adrian. The man's terrified expression gives it all away. The protagonist offers a choice: live, but under his orders, or he doesn't finish the sentence. But the knife in his hand says more than any words. Later, in Cedric's office, screams Echo. "How did he manage to capture another spy?" Cedric is furious, cursing his choice to disobey his father's orders. He vows to keep spying, even if it means risking everything. Meanwhile, Adrian leads masterfully. He has recruited 20 new promising talents, including Eric and Alicia, and his progress is undeniable. At level 159, he is about to reach 6th Circle Mage status, but a sudden notification surprises him. "Emergency. Your presence is requested immediately." Outside the room, a servant reports. Enemy ships have been detected in the airspace. The war is about to begin. In the meeting hall, Count Otis reports that the Crowan Empire army is on the move. Space interference has made teleportation deadly, and all communications are limited to radio. Our protagonist takes the lead. "Get ready! This is war!" His voice resonates, and everyone obeys without hesitation. Within the game, he reaches level 160 and finally reaches the 6th circle. As a reward, you receive a loot of 10 trillion and a new support, a supersonic Black Eagle. He can hardly believe his luck until, in real life, he notices something strange. "She's here," Adrian murmurs, watching the sky. The huge bird descends descends, shaking soldiers and officers with the powerful flapping of its wings. She lands before the protagonist, her imposing presence radiating power. He is impressed as the bird stares at him, almost as if it recognizes him. The war has begun, but now he is not alone. Adrian leaned forward slightly, making a firm gesture for the soldiers to stay away, his eyes fixed on the towering eagle in front of him, whose only apparent ability was shared vision. Intrigued, he stroked the creature's head, reflecting that perhaps its abilities could be improved by completing missions. Despite its simplicity, he recognized that the shared vision would be invaluable in future battles. His thoughts were interrupted by a soldier calling him in a curious tone. "What is this, Commander?" Adrian blinked, surprised. He was so absorbed in the eagle that he didn't notice the circle of soldiers forming around him. Disguising his distraction, he cleared his throat and extended his hand. "Do you want to stay by my side?" To his surprise, the eagle bowed slightly, accepting the gesture with impressive serenity. The contact between the two generated nervous laughter among the soldiers, who whispered, intrigued by the fact that the eagle did not show hostility. Adrian, however, felt his face heat up with embarrassment, internally questioning the reason for his sudden affinity with the animal. Far away, the war had already begun. Reports confirmed that fighting was spreading across the western border, and Adrian's brigade was about to be thrown into chaos. With communications cut off, the protagonist found himself without the familiarity of his online tactical games, but his experience in them gave him a cool confidence. "Imperium Vanguard platoon approaching," informed a hurried soldier. Adrian took a deep breath, keeping calm. "Relax, fall back to initial formation, and have Billum prepare the vanguards." When the enemy vanguards came into view, Adrian shouted, "Activate the 2nd Battalion's energy shield." A massive shot hit the shield, causing the ground to shake. The attack was more intense than he expected. "Report!" he demanded. "The shield has been destroyed, sir. We need 90 seconds to get it back." Adrian narrowed his eyes. He knew he faced something different. The presence of Arcia, an 8th Circle Grandmaster, was comforting, but he still felt a shiver of apprehension. As he observed the enemy fortresses, he noticed that they were smaller, but designed for mass attacks. "So, this is the first time that the Empire has used these weapons," Adrian muttered to himself. Before he could formulate a plan, one of the enemy fortress's rings fell, causing confusion among the soldiers. Adrian immediately realized the intention behind the movement. "Urgent message! Warn the fortress! A kamikaze attack is on the way." The next scene was chaotic. The enemy ship, overloaded with magical power, charged directly towards the allied fortress. The explosion that followed lit up the sky, while Adrian, in a desperate act, used an artifact inherited from his father to conjure a large protective shield. The barrier resisted the impact, but the shock was enough to knock the allied ship to the ground. Disoriented, Adrian regained consciousness while the soldiers celebrated the enemy retreat. He gave quick orders to assess the damage and tend to the injured. Later, the chubby Count Otis approached, applauding. "Magnificent, Brigadier Lawrence." His reaction was impressive. "Thanks to you, we were able to protect our forces." Adrian thanked him politely, although he felt the weight of tiredness. The Count continued. "In fact, I heard curious rumors. It seems that our brave commander has tamed a giant eagle, communicating with it in a mysterious way." Adrian's face flushed immediately. "I just found her fascinating." One of the men in the group commented, "It must be a rare, intelligent race with a high level of mana." Adrian limited himself to a discreet smile, preferring not to reveal everything he knew. He knew that that eagle would be much more than just a companion on his journeys. Adrian felt relieved when the Duke gave him solid support, something tangible in this world of uncertainty, rather than a merely flashy gesture. Meanwhile, the chubby man beside him, with his peculiar imagination, compared the majestic eagle on the coat of arms to a simple dog. "Can I access the internet now, as a reward for the enemy retreating?" asked the young protagonist, full of hope. The man allowed it, and Adrian thanked him with a slight smile. 2 weeks after the start of the war, a voice rang out calling, "Mr. Billiam." The message was clear. "Don't show yourself. It could be a trap." Leader Bam reinforced the warning. "Don't blindly trust the radar and keep your distance," he said, and everyone complied. Bam pondered how Brigadier Lawrence had gained everyone's trust in such a short time. Shortly afterwards, as if by cruel irony, they fell into an ambush. Under pressure, the leader ordered a retreat, thinking that without Adrian's advice, they would likely have been caught off guard in a direct confrontation. Despite the tension, the group eliminated their opponents quickly, but knew they had to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. The wait seemed endless, until, unexpectedly, the commander ordered an advance. Suddenly, something fell, creating a dense cloud of dust that filled the battlefield. 10 vanguards, led by Count Otis, emerged as reinforcements. Billiam, in disbelief, murmured, "They arrived too quickly. Did Adrian already know that?" With a mocking tone, Adrian replied, "Why aren't we attacking? The enemies are trapped in the mountains. His words brought calm to Billiam and motivated the soldiers. Reinforcements don't come often, he continued, so let's defeat at least 5 units before retreating. The surrounding leaders couldn't contain their praise for Adrian's leadership. Count Otis, who had initially attributed his success to luck, now realized the young man's evident ability. He remembered when Adrian almost died from poisoning and how it seemed to have changed him. This boy is truly fascinating, thought the Count, comparing his age to that of his own daughter, Michelle. If my family allows it, I would love to bring him to my side. The Count's statement caused an uproar. Adrian is already dating, someone mentioned, to which the Count replied nonchalantly, I don't see a problem with having another mistress. Nervous laughter echoed as they remembered that Adrian was obsessed with games. The Count shrugged, better that than more dangerous vices. Changing the subject, he ordered, send a report to command. Later, Billiam approached Adrian with a serious tone. Do you have a moment? Of course, but keep it brief, Adrian replied, noticing the man's anxiety. Why do you hide your true power? Asked Billiam directly. Adrian smiled, but his thoughts were a whirlwind. He knew he was going too fast, but he replied firmly, I believe you are a better sir than your brother. If he continues his behavior, he could cause a crisis in the territory. Billiam was surprised by Adrian's sincerity and offered his support should he decide to compete for control with his brother. Adrian thanked him silently, but pretended not to hear the proposal. He didn't want to reveal his plans. Alone, Adrian reflected. He would finish off his brother and stepmother, but he wouldn't share this victory with anyone. A cold smile appeared on his face. At least, he thought, there were still people concerned about the well-being of the territory. Shortly afterwards, Adrian was informed that he would receive the Golden Lion Medal for his exploits. The honor would be bestowed by Reinhardt's own king. Upon hearing the news, Adrian thought wryly, my brother is going to go crazy when he hears this. Indeed, in the office, Cedric struck the table in anger. This merit should be mine! If I had gone to war, everyone would be cheering me now! He confronted his mother, who just sighed. Your father is with Adrian. This is his fault. He's taking everything from me, Cedric shouted. His mother scolded him sternly. Control yourself! Adrian is not your competition. Your inheritance is secured. Despite the words of comfort, Cedric couldn't hide his envy. He had always looked at Adrian with a mix of anger and admiration, hating the glow that always seemed to surround him. But one doubt remained in his mind. Would he, Cedric, really be able to overcome Adrian? He was overwhelmed by the feeling of uselessness ever since they tried to poison him. So why did it keep bothering me so much? Sever's head was full of anger and anguish towards Adrian. A few weeks after the war, he offers the vanguards a drink, each one thanking them as they are served. The soldiers talk about how refreshed and excited they feel now, but the protagonist thinks this is obvious since they are drinking an elixir with a drop of a legendary medicine. He thinks it's a loss, but necessary for the war to end quickly. The vanguards will patrol, and as they say goodbye, someone calls the protagonist saying that the division commander is asking for him, which confuses him. He holds out a piece of dried meat to his giant eagle, who eats it and then flies away. While watching from his transport, saying that the Count calls him a lot, and the man laughs, saying that he trusts the protagonist. Our protagonist thinks this is annoying, but can't do anything about it. He remains confused with the chalice in his hand, noticing that the other commanders are also present. He looks around, thinking he could have sent a message if it was a matter of battle. The protagonist thinks there is something important to announce, and the chubby man appears above with a beaming smile, telling everyone to be glad that they don't have to hear the gunshots, announcing that the end of the war is very near. He explains that the ministers are currently having a meeting. The Count explains that this war was not supposed to last long, but rather was supposed to be an annual event. The commanders think they are fools, and the protagonist says that it is happening similar to his past life. Then he asks about the vanguards that were sent. The Count explains that they must continue this war game until the end, leaving the protagonist uncomfortable and excited. The chubby man tells him to relax, reminding him that due to his honor in battle, he has won several awards and will win more at the end of the war. Our protagonist agrees, raising his chalice and toasting. You think you need to evolve and worry about yourself. Billiam thinks it's a good thing, and Arcia remains silent, watching him. The protagonist asks what would happen if the country went into total war, and the old man says that there would be immense losses and unrest, thinking that it would be an unimaginable catastrophe. Our protagonist says he should have rested more and asks why he was there. He extends his hand to Arcia, who hands him a suit, so he offers it to Billiam, who asks what it is. The protagonist says it was a gift from Count Otis, so it must be precious. Eating the candy, he says that the young master is truly different from the other nobles, saying that he empathizes and even goes to the front of the war for his men. He says he understands having once been an ordinary person, but he also has the composure, dignity of a true noble, leaving the protagonist confused. He says that the protagonist was drinking black tea as enemy troops approached with absolute confidence, and it was because of this composure that soldiers like him were able to relax, stating that everyone in the 2032nd Brigade trusted in it. The protagonist understands that he is mentioning that he will support him as a successor, but before he can say anything, Billy appears, impressing the protagonist. He says that he has trustworthy men that no one approaches and also that he doesn't need to worry about. Surveillance devices. The protagonist becomes serious, thinking that everyone is on his father's side. Our protagonist realizes, saying that he understands, but that this behavior may attract attention, saying that he, the servant Gilbert Baum, would like to serve the second young master of the Lawrence family as his lord since that day. The boy asks if the others outside think the same way, and he confirms. Our protagonist is silent, thinking for a moment, then he says he will accept this, leaving the old man happy. But there is a condition, and the old man asks what it is. Adrian tells him he should act normally, which worries the old man for a moment. The protagonist says that he will not be insignificant, and says that he has a plan to win, and therefore needs to follow his orders. He asks how many knights will follow him, and the old man says 5 vanguards and about 30 knights, but that number could double. Our protagonist thinks it won't be bad. He stands up, saying it's good enough. But before he leaves, Bam says he has one more thing to tell him, explaining that the protagonist's stepmother, Anna, wants to assign pieces to him, and perhaps it would be a good idea to recruit him as soon as possible, leaving the protagonist surprised upon hearing his name. He remembers that he was the substitute commander of the Knight Order and his skills were impressive, but the boy thought he had left the order because he was involved in Anna's family's political struggle. Billum says that with his return, many riders may change their minds. Adrian knows that this is the typical popular knight who can expand his army just by his inclusion, and perhaps it will be enough to compete with Anna and Cedric's forces. And he thinks that's not a bad idea, especially considering it's a power he can use outside of his family. The boy tells the man to organize his secret meeting with him. The man says he will investigate and leaves the room. The soldiers bow. Our protagonist thinks power is good, but he has another goal. Picking up his glasses, he says that his main priority is to complete the quest to find Fortuna and form his 7th degree circle in the game. Our protagonist died along with Arcia and her eagle. The system informs you to try again when you regain your experience. Our hero screams in despair, preparing a spell. He asks Arcia to protect him during this time. Our protagonist did not experience death, even though it is normal to overcome difficulties in a game. The problem is that he will feel immense pain when he dies. Even Arcia is being pushed back from the attacks. He thinks he has always maintained his own safety in every fight, but this time is different. Arcia and her eagle are attacked and end up being defeated, leaving only our protagonist, who will be killed by the mate of death, Pascal. The boy realizes that he is not only an aura master, but also has an abnormally strong body, being killed. The protagonist thinks he is on a much higher level. The system respawns him in a nearby village. He places his hand on his chest, feeling the pain. Our protagonist thinks he can't complain about his pain with so many people around. Opening the system, he thinks it has been very easy so far. Our protagonist uses a resurrection scroll to resurrect his support, Arcia. She apologizes to the protagonist. The protagonist asks if she is okay, and she says she can bear the pain. The boy thinks he recruited her without thinking because of her status as a tank. The more their relationship grows, the more embarrassed he feels about standing behind her and feels he needs to change his combat style so that she doesn't suffer. But in the end, he thinks he needs to change anyway. In fighting, he noticed that there is a limit to his very simple combat style. Arcia protects the eagle, distracts and attacks by surprise, and our protagonist causes all the damage with his magic. They can maintain this, but the cast time is delaying the main damage. He figures that one way to cover this gap is to use Black Eagle's defense, but if she had frequent damage, that would help. He only has 3 options now: reduce his attack to attack more often, or use Black Eagle as a hit-and-run warrior, and finally the option for Arcia to use her sword to deal damage. The first option is really bad, but the other 2 are better, and he tells Arcia they will try. Then, in the second battle, the protagonist died again, and the system tells him to try again. He becomes extremely angry at the source, shouting if this is even possible, resurrecting Arcia. She apologizes, but the protagonist takes the blame. He says he tried to use them as warriors, but the eagle died in less than a minute, so the protagonist died in 3 minutes, and Arcia died shortly after. The biggest problem was that the protagonist's eagle died quickly, according to him. The eagle managed to distract the boss for a while, and he thinks it would be a good idea to equip it with a breastplate. The protagonist will try again and thinks it will work eventually. After all, this is a test to reach the 7th circle. However, the protagonist dies again, which leaves him filled with rage. He thinks it wasn't bad, and that it worked a little. The protagonist begins to understand the Death Knight's pattern, and will try again in the 4th battle. The Death Knight asks if this is serious, asking if he is fighting a bunch of acrobats. The knight says he has a talent for putting him in a good mood and asks if he wants to change his class to clown. The protagonist asks if he has ever heard of a human bomber, then begins launching several magical attacks towards the knight, shouting at him to die as he attacks. The knight blocks with his sword as Arcia attacks him. Adrian thinks he is doing well, but his eagle begins to tire, starting to fall and leaving him wobbly in front of the knight, who scarily says that it is good to see him on the ground. The protagonist gets nervous and says hello to the Lord until he receives an attack that kills him again. In the 9th battle, the protagonist is tired. They try different formations, and the knight says it's fun to see a mage on the front lines. This time, he managed to survive, dodging and dealing much more damage than the last time. They will try again with items focused on reflexes and not sorcery. Now he will become an evasive mage like never before. He flees while attacking, managing to dodge attacks while charging his spell, dodging with more and more dexterity, launching several simultaneous attacks while attacking with Arcia. But the knight avoids the attacks, hitting both of them and defeating them. At this moment, the protagonist smiles, thinking that he finally managed to find a way to win, being an evasive mage. He managed to last 62 minutes and dealt 84% damage for the knight, and if he keeps trying, he will certainly be able to win. He gets up from the bed, taking off his glasses, thinking he has exceeded the connection time. He thought they would end up at level 200 that day, but they are stuck in an unexpected place. Stretching, he feels something strange, as if his body is slowing down. Arcia explains that this is normal after experiencing death and resurrection countless times. He asks if she feels the same. Arcia can't say, but she feels like she's stronger in some way, attributed to the experience she's gained. The protagonist thinks he's used to it, but Arcia seems to be becoming more human as she continues to experience these things. The girl asks if he has any orders for her, but he says no, that he is going to sleep and that they will try again when he wakes up. Arcia agrees. After countless battles and attempts, in the 18th fight, everyone is still alive. Death begins to disintegrate before dying, praising the protagonist for dealing 100% damage. Raising his arms, he celebrates, happy that he finally managed to win. The system congratulates you for completing the 7th level of the Fortuna Reunion quest. Sometime later, on the 8th floor of the tower, the protagonist comments that this floor was much larger compared to the others, and that it was very detailed, as if everything were real, questioning whether this time there would be 2 enemies. However, Arcia asks him to calm down, smiling, as they watch the magic that reveals an elf with the appearance of an old man. Adrian asks if this would be his new support, mentioning that it looked very familiar. Then, the elf wakes up saying that his name was Chester, stating that he took care of Destiny and was also Manuel Lucas's, leaving Adrian surprised. Continuing to speak, Chester says that he was also an NPC, but was created from Manuel Lucas's memories. The protagonist, observing the situation, thinks that even if he was created with Manuel Lucas's memories, that didn't guarantee that he would help him, assuming that the dwarf could take away his things. Chester says there was no need to worry. Adrian mentions that Chester didn't look like an NPC and was very different from the others because he seemed to be alive. Chester says he didn't have a soul, but he wasn't created to act in a specific way because he was created with someone's living memories. So the protagonist assumes that even if Manuel Lucas couldn't overcome old age, he would always live in that place. Chester says it could be seen that way since that was the main reason for the creation of Hollywood. But nothing was eternal because he was just a shadow of someone who was already gone. His job was not to live forever as an NPC, but to live in the lives of future generations. No matter how hard you tried to create a clone, he would never be Manuel Lucas. In fact, if the idea really were to create a clone to live forever, it wouldn't be in the virtual world. It would just need a homunculus like AR. Adrian thought he believed Manuel Lucas would try to possess him so he could live, or something like that, but luckily, that wasn't the case. He questions why the dwarf was there, mentioning that the previous floor had been very difficult, asking if he would stop fighting and focus on areas other than that. Then, Chester weighs his stick, where a system window appears. The system reports that Adrian had gained 5 uses of the Hollywood System Administrator Authority. Chester mentions that Adrian's destiny was to obtain everything Manuel Lucas had, and it was expected that his authority would also be given to him. However, initially, there would be limitations, but over time, they would disappear. He could also use administrator authority on any program based on the Hollywood system. Adrian is surprised because even though Hollywood is a virtual world, it was no different than the internet on Earth. But Chester mentions that there were rules for using authority. Adrian says he was worried, but the rules made sense because he wasn't sure who would get the permits. She asks if he could launder the money he had earned. Chester responds that he had a few methods, and one of them was to create false stock investment reports. The protagonist asks if it wouldn't be risky lucky if someone reviewed the documents. But Chester says the probability was low. Adrian responds that he would like to use one of his permissions. The fragment states that his fortune was 12 trillion in loot. He asks if the boy would like to organize the loot he would get from that floor, asking if he wanted anything else. Adrian responds that Arcia needed to have a record. The protagonist thinks he was no different from a genin in a lamp, wondering if he was there to help him with the administrator's authorities. So Chester says yes. Adrian asks why he went so far for people he never met. Chester responds that it was a way of showing longing because he didn't want other people's lives to be as difficult as his. Adrian thinks that those were not the words of someone history would call legendary. And if it weren't for Manhwa creating a legacy for future generations, his life would be pathetic because he couldn't even dream of what it would be like today. He thanks the fragment, but says it wasn't Manuel Lucas. He looks at the fragment. Adrian thinks he had just smiled or it was his imagination. Then, the system informs him that he had gained 50 trillion loot and also acquired the Acarus Sky Fortress. Meanwhile, in the city of Nishim, the former vice captain of the Night Order hears of Adrian's name. A man next to him comments about the protagonist, mentioning that if he took control of the territory, everything would evolve beyond what it is now. He asks if the captain would support Adrian. However, the furious captain thinks he was being called for another reason. The man responds that he heard that Adrian distinguished himself in the war, but questions whether his influence was too small to act alone. Bam apologetically remembers that he himself was in a similar position not long ago and thought that young Master Adrian was lucky and still the same. He asks if Adrian is still the same. The man replies no, and that was just the tip of the iceberg shown to the world. He witnessed his abilities because he was on the front lines under Adrian's orders and would dare say he is the greatest genius of that era. Cedric's allies, even them, decided to support Adrian. The man thinks the story of the incredible prodigy who fell from grace was a lie, considering Adrian's intelligence and Bill's words. He is convinced that Adrian deserves his attention. The man asks Billum what he should do, so he asks Simi to use her contacts to convince the neutral vassals to support Adrian. The captain, in turn, thinks that this task would be extremely complicated and very interesting. Billum smiles, saying this was a big decision, but the captain says he hadn't yet said he would support Adrian because before making any decision he needs to know you. The man replies that the young master would love to visit him and that he would call Adrian to talk about his disposition. While the man was talking to the protagonist, the captain thought he would see if his words were true and if Adrian really deserved his support. They become nervous when they feel extremely soft mana and notice something strange. It was a spatial control magic of at least the 7th circle that brought Adrian to the scene. With stagnant expressions, they didn't know they were surrounded and it didn't surprise them because they came with several artifacts. Arcia gives the order to loot and defeat the 5 assassins. The protagonist, realizing the situation, says that perhaps he had too many expectations as he heard that they were the most powerful on the continent. Even so, they were surrounded by assassins. Bill questions what just happened, and Adrian mentions that he spent 13 years preparing for that moment and that he was expected to have a master aura by his side. The captain, observing the situation, questions what he was thinking because he should worry about being useful to him and that was the type of person in front of him. Adrian, seeing the former captain's skills, thinks he wasn't that bad. The man asks if it was Adrian who sent them, and the boy confirms, saying that they must have a lot of questions. Using a repair skill, Adrian surprises the man by making the bloodstains and bodies disappear. Then he says that they would go to another place using teleportation magic, the Kingdom of the Moons, the nation with the most mages behind the 4 empires. Still, if you asked anyone about the most famous, they would all say just one name, Duim Riverdale, a great mage and successful teacher who trained 6 7th circle mages. They would say the same thing. The greatest wizard in history is Lucas, but the greatest teacher is Duke K. Riverg. In disbelief, the protagonist asks if he had been his teacher, remembering that he had died years ago. Adrian claims that he had really died, however. He was the one who taught everything he knew and was able to learn without any problems. The man, in turn, asks how he learned, since he spent most of his time playing. The boy responds that this was the only place where he could train without restrictions, as K taught him in both worlds. However, everything Adrian was saying was a lie. An archmage falling from the sky? No one would believe he was only 20 years old. The best way to make people believe was to use the title of Riverdale Disciple. Also, he was prepared because he had a platinum plaque and a hologram of them together, which weren't real because he basically asked ADM Chester to make them like that. He could use them like what he was holding there. There were several references to Riverdale, and a record of having a secret disciple that no one knew who he was. Even the Riverdale family or their disciples could trust Adrian if they ended up finding him. He would like to say he was the heir to Lucas's destiny, but if he said that, he would never have peace again. Adrian tells Arcia and the man that they would take care of Anna and Cedric, and that they shouldn't worry about expanding their influence and bringing people together to do so. The man asks why he was called there. Adrian, in turn, mentions that it was his plan from the beginning because he had something he could do for the boy. Reaching out, Adrian places placed his watch on the man's wrist. A system window soon appeared with an exclamation mark, indicating that there were 20 billion loot in the account. Adrian asked if he would like to share that information, suggesting that the man create a group under his command to collect information. Although it would be cruel to ask a knight for such a job, Adrian knew they would face Raven, and it was necessary. The man hesitated, questioning if Adrian truly believed that, as gathering such wealth seemed nearly impossible. Adrian smiled, saying that he didn't need to worry, as he had a special talent for investing, thinking that the man would faint if he knew that Adrian had 3,000 times more than that. Adrian continued, stating that he would take CC's place, inherit the family, and have power that no one in that nation could disrespect. The man bowed, stating that he was next to Adrian. Meanwhile, at the Lawrence family house, the lady questioned how 5 experienced killers had disappeared without a trace. She asked the man why they failed and where Pisus and Bielam were. The man said Bielam returned to his unit, but Pisus's whereabouts were still unknown. The lady concluded that he must be alive, because Bielam would have reported it to her husband if Pisus was dead. Thinking that if these two were together, they must have been plotting against her. She remembered her husband's words, assuming she had no choice. Obey, he thought, because if he went against the Viscount right then, things would only get worse. But his actions went beyond expectations, and everyone was talking about his exploits in war. Adrian would earn a title. If Bam and Pisus joined him, they would become unstoppable. So she couldn't let them do whatever they wanted. The servant asked how she would like to deal with the guilt of the murder, as she had assured her they could handle the job. He questioned whether they should kill Adrian. The lady gave the butler a threatening look and asked if he was scared, as if the easiest way was the only way. However, if he did that, there would be no going back for Earl Lawrence. Plus, Adrian was very famous. She asked the butler how long he had worked for her, saying it would be his 30s. The woman took a bottle and poured wine over the man's head, stating that he should know that she hated being contradicted. She questioned whether he thought he didn't know what he was doing, stating that there was no other way than that. She asked if the man thought he was smarter than her. Desperate, the butler apologized, promising that it would never happen again. The lady, in turn, said that he would be framed, not only as a commoner, but as the Viscount's dying son, so someone needed to take responsibility for this. All this time, the butler had demonstrated his loyalty, and it would be easier this time. The man assured that he would prove his loyalty. Meanwhile, the protagonist was celebrating his victory in battle, relieved that the war had safely ended. The other man commented that he never thought he would gain recognition, but now he was looking forward to the award ceremony. People started to thank the boy, and Adrian thought they were taking advantage of something he did, but that was normal. If he had kept the rewards to himself, this wouldn't have happened. Adrian said that everything only happened because the man trusted his wisdom, leaving the man embarrassed, asking if it would have been better if the war had continued a little longer. Concerned, the man mentioned that if the war continued and Adrian received more recognition, he could end up becoming a lord. However, now, with what he had, the reward would be limited. Adrian remembered that there was a big difference between inheriting a title and earning it for yourself. No matter how much his position rose, he didn't have a county, so he couldn't pass his title on. Adrian replied that it was okay, because he didn't fight expecting something in return. The man commented that he had a lot of potential, but didn't have a place to fully express himself. Adrian thought he would be the rightful heir to his family once he removed Cedric. The Count then mentioned that he could get involved with his family, mentioning that he had a daughter, and that Adrian could do that if he wanted. Adrian said he would consider it. The Count responded to consider why he would welcome him with open arms, but Adrian thought his daughter was known to be a maniac. However, this didn't seem to be a problem for him. Finally, after the war, he could return, and when he did, Anna and Cedric would see things they never expected. The day after the battle ended, the provincial army was dismantled. The other captain greeted him, telling him to visit them sometime later. Adrian was already in the game, tired, mentioning that he progressed like crazy every time he had free time. He was at level 202, 10 days after reaching level 200, and yet he seemed to be making no progress at all. Their combat attributes had improved since the battle against the Death Knight. The monsters had also gotten stronger, and the experience limit had increased, making it impossible to gain a level once a day like before. But this wasn't a personal problem, because that monster they just defeated required a group of at least 5 people. He debated whether he should look for a new member of the group, but he couldn't afford to attract attention. That's when Arcia appeared. The girl was motionless, and Crow appeared. Adrian asked what had happened, wondering if there was anything out of the ordinary. When he left the game, he realized that Arcia was defending him with her shield ability, protecting the girl. Arcia, in turn, explained that they were similar killers to those they had faced before. Adrian wondered since when assassins used aura swords, but Arcia wasn't sure, mentioning that they were armed with armor and aura swords. The protagonist remained calm, considering there were 3 vanguards wanting to kill him. Arcia explained that Baum was prepared for any attack as he had slowed down the enemies, and his vassals were dealing with them now. battle. Adrian thought that with 5 vanguards, it wouldn't be that difficult. However, for Arcia, it wouldn't be easy. Among the debris, several eyes and a shooting golem appeared. There were 6 in total. Arcia feared that the target had changed to him instead of Mr. Billum. Pieces handed an aura sword to Arcia, and Adrian took a staff capable of reducing the amount of magical power consumed. While the golem tried to attack the barrier, it was insufficient. The protagonist chose the wrong target, using the flame burst ability to launch the golems into the air, where a fiery explosion erupted. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Adrian left the plane and gave a signal to Arcia. Meanwhile, Vanguard Captain received a call from one of his subordinates saying something was wrong. For the man, it should have ended by now. Noticing the explosion caused by the protagonist, he became nervous, asking why such a monster was hidden in the Lauren family. He gave the order to kill the boy, as he was interfering with the teleportation. However, they couldn't, because there was an aura master nearby. The man thought he was going crazy, as not only was there an archangel, but also an aura master, and now they were on their own. The protagonist in turn didn't let him escape, using magic to arrest the Vanguard man. Arcia advanced towards the man, about to attack him. Adrian asked her to stop, stating that there was no point in trying to escape, and suggested that he could live if he helped them. At that moment, the man killed himself, checking the man's pulse. Arcia mentioned that he was dead because he had chewable poison hidden in his MERS. Adrian recognized that because he didn't have much experience, he had underestimated their determination. A group of vanguards arrived, calling the protagonist back. The man replied that Adrian was Duke Riverdale's disciple, leaving everyone surprised. The vice commander said that Adrian had managed to achieve this status because he was special and was making plans behind the scenes. Hearing the man's words, Adrian was surprised, mentioning that Bam was very good at influencing people. Sometime later in the Lauren family, the protagonist found his mother with tears in her eyes. The woman asked if he was hurt anywhere. While with his mother, his father commented that he had worked hard. Adrian thought it was completely normal to hold a celebratory parade, but it was calm there. His father apologized, saying he should have given a grand reception, but that was fine with the boy because he didn't like noisy events. Thinking that it must be Anna and Cedric's doing, because who would bother to make a stop for someone who was about to die? His father, in turn, said that in return, they prepared a large feast, leaving Adrian apprehensive. The system notifies that power saving mode has been activated, making Adrian smile at the banquet. Everyone greeted the protagonist, some saying they managed to come back alive just because of him. His father asked if he learned how to win over people on the battlefield. Then Anna and Cedric appeared. The protagonist commented that he hadn't seen them in 3 months, so he greeted them. Watching Anna, Adrian noticed that she looked like she had seen a ghost. Observing the other man, Adrian questions what happened to him. He notices, through the system window, that the other guy was relieved and happy to see the statistics. It was expected, Adrian thinks. Knight Commander Cedric, in turn, says that as someone who carried the family name, he had done a good job. Even if it wasn't a big deal, he should be praised. Adrian feels a growing anger, wanting to cut off those heads right now, but he needed to find justifications first. Cedric asks if Adrian was okay with being praised, calling him a bastard. Adrian, in turn, responds dismissively that he actually believed he would be happy hearing his compliments. It was ridiculous, as if Cedric could do anything. If Cedric had led those people onto the battlefield, he would have been completely annihilated. These words make Cedric furious. Meanwhile, one of the butlers accidentally drops one of his dishes. The boy looks at Anna and says that if she had something to say, she should say it directly. Cedric, in turn, starts laughing, mentioning that Adrian became ruder after returning from the battlefield. He points his sword towards Adrian, saying he didn't even know what fear was anymore, but his father appears to intervene in the situation. Adrian asks him to be quiet and just watch. Cedric insists he had Adrian in the palm of his hand. Adrian understands why he acted the way he did now. Maybe it was the reason for that rebel's investigation, asking how Cedric dared to try to overthrow that family by pointing his sword at Billum. Confused about why Cedric was involved, he continues to talk, mentioning that it was Bam who persuaded Adrian to try to destroy that family. The argument heats up, and Cedric orders them to capture him immediately. However, his soldiers remain motionless. Cedric asks what they were doing, telling them to hurry up and carry out his order. He states that if they wanted to capture Vice Commander Billum, they should do it personally. Cedric questions what he was talking about, advancing his sword towards Adrian. Arcia intervenes in the situation, asking what was wrong with that girl and why she was so strong. Noticing the man's resistance, Arcia hits him with a piece of chicken, leaving everyone surprised. Cedric, knocked out, can't believe what happened.